You lost your sight, along with everyone else on Earth, in the Great Blinding. 2 years later, without warning, your sight returns. As you look around, you realize that every available wall, floor, and surface has been painted with the same message. Don't tell them you can see. Hello, my name is Kana, and welcome to Friday Night Fairy Tales, a new podcast that I'm starting to do some storytelling and read snippets of people's stories and writings all across the internet. And today we're starting with the subreddit Writing Prompts with the user Xaviera, which is spelled Xaviira, and this is a post that was made 7 years ago. And I came across this post and thought it was very interesting, and I haven't read these stories yet, so we're gonna find out what they're about at the same time. And I'm very curious to know how exactly they spun this prompt. The prompt being, you lost your sight along with everyone else on Earth in the Great Blinding. 2 years later, without warning, your sight returns. As you look around, you realize that every available wall, floor, and surface has been painted with the same message. Don't tell them you can see. And this had a very ominous tone to it. A very interesting kind of, I almost want to say, like apocalyptic to an extent, but also with kind of like a supernatural vibe to it. Like, you get a lot of questions out of this, like, well, how did they lose their sight? And how did your sight return? And then how did someone paint everything with the message, don't tell them you can see? That's very interesting, and I'm very excited to delve deeper into this. So the first post is by a user named Ruego nos perdone Dios, and hopefully I pronounced that right. This is a post that was made 7 years ago in the subreddit under this prompt, and it begins, "We called it humanity's worst disaster. History named it the Great Blinding. What that doesn't entail is that it was our own damn fault. The world was wrought into chaos after several months of warnings, and we simply elected to ignore them. Feigning assurance. Oh, that'll go away once we start on it. That's no problem for the government. They'll take care of us. Don't get involved. You'll just get in the way of the experts." Ultimately, no one did anything about it because they thought others were on top of the problem. Indeed, this led to a fading away of a layer of ozone that prevented the full wrath of the sun. The ozone wasn't fully gone, no, but enough that the light truly lit up the earth. When it was day, we were all doomed. No corner of darkness could hide us. It took mere seconds and we were caught. There were legends of a group of roamers traveling eternally into the night, never letting the day come upon them. It's been 2 years since. The night doesn't last very long, and we don't walk by sight anymore. We walk by faith. In faith, we sense the heat. The night, we developed patterns of excursions into the dark. The already blind, we called them ushers of darkness, led us. They knew the world unlike us. We fell into line, we worshipped them. They walked the world, took us places with cool air, cold water, taught us to feel the world around us. And then it happened. Colors poured into my periphery, filling my vision. At first, I was confused. Dreaming? Tripping? Then everything settled into place. The world stood in plain view. I was astonished at what I saw. Scribblings everywhere. Didn't matter how far I went, even on the people themselves, myself included. Don't tell them you can see. Granted, it was all dim since we were hiding in the dark, but there was enough. I wasn't sure what would happen if I did tell them despite the warning, so I played along. I saw where the ushers of darkness led us. They led us through dangerous places, but on safe paths, balancing on a thin rope between life and death. I nearly got caught myself veering off the path because of my insatiable curiosity. We couldn't do much anyway, we were holed up from the sun's wrath. Then I started feeling something was off. No one was talking. It was pure silence. Yet we kept doing the same things again and again, our excursions in the dark to scavenge, then back to our darkly caves with Oasis. But silence. I tried to talk but was afraid I'd slip up and show I could see. After all, what we talk about tend to be what we feel or see. The risks simply weren't worth it. Then I thought, what if they all could see? This is a fascinating post, especially interesting as an introduction to this concept, like the very first one that we're reading today. And it's cool because it introduces kind of like a scientific explanation for why everybody became blind, which was the destruction of the ozone layer, leading to an overabundance of like sun radiation. It's too bright now, and so everybody becomes blind. But then there is a bit of a supernatural element to it too, where for whatever reason, it seems that their sight has returned, and possibly other people, as they speculated at the very end. That's a very cool twist, And so yeah, this is a very cool introduction, and it's so interesting to see like this sort of narrative of the world kind of devolving into chaos because of this, this sudden happenstance where now society can't really function as it used to. It almost like regresses back into like a time pre a lot of our technology, modern day technology that allows us to sort of accommodate to an extent for people who have any sort of disabilities. And this was so fascinating, almost like the tribalism that's introduced as well. Very, very cool. Alright, so the next post is by a user named Chaos Theory 0 from 7 years ago. And it begins, "When the blinding first occurred, I thought I was the only individual affected. I was sitting at my desk working on a school paper, and in an instant, everything went black. I had cried out to my parents in fear and confusion, but their response was like an echo of my own. They too couldn't see. And we soon learned the entire world had been victim to having their sight filled with darkness. Interestingly enough, we don't think this affected any of the animals living on the earth, just us humans. The only strange thing that occurred after this was the fact that the demand for milk skyrocketed. At first, adapting was extremely difficult. Something as mundane and simple as using the bathroom had become a daily challenge I didn't look forward to. Within a few months, support groups had been created by individuals who were already blind prior to the incident. They assisted those who were struggling with adapting to their newfound obstacle. Thankfully, the world never really stopped moving or progressing. Outside of major adjustments that had to be made, such as devising a different mode of transportation or different requirements and standards in the working world, we managed to pull through. It's been about 2 years since the blinding, and there were times where I had forgotten such an event occurred. I was taking a short walk to the store to get some groceries. I don't know why, but I've developed an almost dependency-like state on milk. I had gripped the handle to the door to the small grocery store and pushed the door open. A bell was hung on the inside handle of the door. "Hello, let me know if you need help finding anything," a voice said to my right. "Thanks, Dave. I will," I responded. Oh man, I gave Dave a very chill, feminine voice. "Hey John, how have you been?" he asked with a somewhat enthusiastic tone. With a somewhat slow pace, I walked around the store, feeling around the braille to determine if I had found my item. Pretty much the same," I said with a bit of a chuckle. My hand touched something cold. Finally, found the milk. As I was about to open the door, I could see my reflection in the rectangle-shaped window of the cooler. I wasn't entirely sure how to react, nor was I sure as to what happened. I was looking at myself, in the mirror, for the first time in 2 years. I started shaking and I could feel warmth and moisture filling my eyes, and I noticed on the reflection itself, I was so excited I hadn't even noticed. In fact, most of the interior was covered in this writing. Looked a little closer at the message written in black. "Don't tell them you can see." What the hell does that mean? Who's them? I then caught a glimpse of the individual standing behind the counter at the store. Who, what the fuck is that? John, you need some help, buddy? It asked. It had Dave's voice, but it definitely wasn't Dave, and the way its mouth moved was... Wait, is that its mouth? I have no idea. I was staring at something that was at least 6 feet tall, grotesque, and eldritch, was the only way I could describe it. Its dark brown skin was smooth and moist, with extremely tiny openings on its skin. It wasn't wearing any type of clothing, its arms were somewhat long and thin-looking appendages that ended in human-looking hands. Its head was shaped like a large basketball. The creature's mouth looked to be in a vertical position, and when it spoke, I could see many layers and rows of crocodile-like teeth. Here, John, let me come help, it said. Its voice had changed as well. It was gurgled and sounded like it was being put through a filter. As it moved, I could hear it squish against the floor. That's the first time I've ever heard that. Why am I hearing that just now? Why have I never heard that before? Instead of gaping at the reflection and trying to ascertain how it walks, I simply stared at a jug of milk. That's when I noticed the color of the milk. It wasn't white or brown or any color a milk should be. It was dark black. As the creature grew closer, a foul smell harassed my nostrils. It took everything I had not to vomit. It reached out with its human-like appendage and touched my shoulder. My entire body tensed up. We're having a lot of different specials on milk today, it said, and I could see its mouth open wide behind my head with what I assumed was a smile. Ah, that's such a good entry. Man, that's awesome. So it takes it in more of like a horror-esque spin. Oh, that's fascinating. So we're introduced to like a couple of characters here. You've got our narrator, and then you've got Dave as well, who's clearly not exactly who he seems to be. And that's so cool that like all of a sudden it just happens, and so much of the reasoning as to how any of this happened is very left in the dark, but you're kind of getting these like little breadcrumbs, these little hints that make you ask questions like, what's going on with the milk? Clearly there's been milk, that people are becoming addicted to, craving, and so he goes to the store to get milk and doesn't really question it until he finally has his sight back again, kind of like, I don't know, one of the chosen ones, I suppose, that somehow gets their sight back in some supernatural way, and then he starts to discover things but like doesn't know how to react because it's so different from what he was used to, and so different from reality, very monstrous. And that description of that creature was, made my skin crawl a little bit. Man, this was a very interesting concept. I'm so curious. If they wrote more at any point, that would be so cool. I would love to see where that goes with it. But it also is like very nice and neat as a short story entry to this. So that's really cool. Because like it's possible that like maybe the milk is, contributing to the like monstrification of, if that's a word even, of all of these people. And then, like, were they even people to begin with? Were people starting to get replaced by monsters? Or were the monsters there to begin with and then took over and have been feeding people this milk? Are they aliens? Like, what's going on here? I love the horror spin that's been put on this. That's so, so cool. Alright, let's look at another entry over here. So this entry is by Bit O Bear from, again, 7 years ago. And it begins, when I first regained my sight, I saw the messages. Don't tell them you can see. I wondered who them might be. I'll be honest, my first thought was space aliens or some sort of monsters from a Stygian realm. I was terrified. I carefully got out my cane and went about my business, often closing my eyes to make the subterfuge more believable. Then I saw my first glimpse of the truth. We were them. The scant few that could see were chained or harnessed to work for the blind masses. Not down on the grubby streets where most of us eked out our living, mind you. There was a military or industrial wealth class that had quickly seized the few who had never gone blind. In the first days of the Great Blinding, there had been a few helpful souls that had not succumbed according to the rumors. But the rumors faded when everyone realized they'd never met a sighted person or became unsure of their memories of those first few traumatic days. Over time, it was revealed that a few people took longer to lose their sight, and so many people died in those first weeks that who was to say when someone simply disappeared. But now I could glance across distant vistas and through chain-link fences at the sighted slaves doing the work only sighted people can do. Tethered and beaten, the slaves, some hobbled by broken or missing feet, could glare defiance and leave messages that the blind overseers couldn't detect. The words were in mismatched paints or organic stains. The words were in the margins of the braille paperwork. The messages were passed by a 1 in 1,000 moment of eye contact and a nodding head as you passed on the street. In the land of the blind, the sighted man is not king. He is valuable property, but revolution is brewing. Wow, this one is cool too, and it takes it in a completely different direction, where it's kind of like a similar vein of like the post-apocalyptic nature of like how the first one was, but in the sense that like there is still structured society, but the what's it called? The people who didn't lose their sight became like these valuable jewels that were taken over and are now being commanded by all the others. And it's so cool also that like the ability to see that they have retained grants them kind of like an ability to whisper among themselves in such a way that so that the higher ups won't be able to detect them. This is like sort of going into some, I feel like some social commentary almost, and a very interesting like social narrative regarding that like revolution that they said is brewing. That's so cool. And it also like it doesn't explain too much about how exactly people came to become blind, so a lot of that explanation is kind of just left up to the reader to figure out, and so do the other posts. There's a lot of ambiguity, especially in like a short story, but in this case it's kind of like delving into that aftermath. So we're talking about less so of how this came to be, but more so what is the result of it? What is the social result of like, after this happens, how do humans behave and what do they do to each other? And like when there's an exception, when there's people who retained their sight or regained their sight, what happens to them? That is so fascinating. Very cool story. Alright, let's take a look at the next one, which is by Gamick, G-A-M-I-C-K 13. And this was also, again, written 7 years ago. In this post, they say, I still dreamed of seeing. I think that's why I initially snoozed my alarm clock instead of gasping for joy, but as I rolled back over to look at my wife lying next to me, I did gasp. Not for joy, but out of shock. On the wall behind Catherine, a message had been hastily painted on the wall. Don't tell them, you can see. What's wrong? Catherine said groggily, but alarmed. Oh, I didn't make her sound alarmed at all. What's wrong, man? Her vacant stare reminding me that for the last 2 years I have been blind. I am unable to respond as the realization of what is happening has not fully dawned on me. Jim? She now sounds more awake and even more concerned. She flails out her arms, searching for me, and when her hand rests on my shoulder, I have regained enough composure to speak. Nothing, I stammer. Just had a nightmare. The tension in her face eases as her hand glides up to my face and leans in for a kiss. You had me worried, she sighs. Do you want to talk about it? No, I respond quietly, still trying to get my bearings. I sit up and look around the room, growing more confused and horrified as I do. On every available surface, I can see the same message has been painted. Don't tell them you can see. The paint is obviously not new, as it has slightly faded from a bright red to a more rusted maroon. I also see the guide rod we had been using to navigate the new home we were given a year after the Great Blinding took place. The room looked very different from how I dreamed of it. It seemed smaller, and dust had settled on all the surfaces that were not regularly used. As I took in the first glimpses of the room I have spent the last year in, growing more uneasy as I read the same message over and over, I felt a hand on the small of my back. I gave a startled yelp and nearly jumped out of bed. "Must have been a bad one," Catherine giggled from behind me. "Sure you don't want to talk about it?" "Maybe later," I mumbled. I turned to face her and was overcome with emotion. In 2 years, she hasn't changed much. Her chestnut hair was longer than I remembered it and was haphazardly strewn around her. Her soft smile showed a few more smile lines around the corners of her mouth. The eyes were the biggest difference. They looked glossed over and unfocused, the rich brown covered with a grayish haze. I felt a pang of sadness and guilt washed over me as I stared at those eyes. The mixture of joy and grief became too much, and I excused myself to go to the bathroom. As I stood up to leave, I finally noticed the dark, amorphous shape in the corner and stopped with my breath caught in my throat. It wavered on the edges as if it were pulsing or breathing. It seemed to be pulling in the light around it, further obscuring it from my sight. I reached out to steady myself on the guide rod, and as I did, the shape slithered into the bathroom. "Hurry up," Catherine complained. "I need to go too." This is cool. So I feel like this one delves more into sort of the emotional reaction to all of this and kind of telling a more like domestic story of what happens in the aftermath, where life kind of continues as normal, but you can see the changes in their lifestyles. You can see the differences in the way that they move and the way that they interact with each other and react to each other. And I love the way that it started with the line, "I still dreamed of seeing." That's such a beautiful sentence of that alludes to the prompt that we've been given here, where it with just one simple sentence it sets up that narrative of yes, we're going into this short story understanding that these people have not been able to see for quite a while, if it means that they still dreamed of seeing, but it's something that they long for, right? They dream about it. And then suddenly waking up with this, and I loved the detail in towards the end where the main character Jim was talking about the beauty of his wife as he gazes upon her again for the first time in a very long time, and that to me was just so touching. And then of course we've got the little dark turn at the end with, you know, the slime that's kind of, you know, the slime or amorphous shape, the dark amorphous shape that we've got there that's pulsing and doing weird creepy shit. And has just gone into the bathroom that you need to go into. So alas, yeah, that's kind of terrifying. All right, so we've got another set of stories. I've got 2 more that I wanted to read out of this post, and I haven't looked through them yet, but I've been scrolling through the length, and these ones are a little bit longer. It looks like they did not just a part 1, but also a part 2 and possibly additional parts. So the first one that I wanted to check out was one by Cricket Jacked, and I'm looking at a post that they made on their own subreddit, Books of Cricket, where it looks like they're compiling a lot of their writings. So please, by all means, go take a peek at that and see all of the other stuff that they've written as well. And this post specifically was made 6 years ago, I think. Let me see the original post on it was made, okay, so the original post was made 7 years ago on the, like, under the writing prompt, and then they reposted it as a part 1 with multiple parts afterwards onto their own subreddit, Books of Cricket, after popular demand, it seems. So let's take a look. It begins, "Most people lost their sight waking up on the morning of the first day, as the event started in the middle of the night. The change only occurred as one slept, so others attempted to remain awake to retain their vision for longer. This effort proved to be pointless as the effects took hold the moment they closed their eyes and started to doze. As the days stretched into weeks, microsleep ended up taking off the vision of the most resilient. Adjusting to the change was difficult, but there was ease in knowing that everyone was blind and that we all shared the same struggle. Those that were blind before the change became valuable assets to their communities. They found themselves teaching thousands in neighborhoods where there were no blind people before. I spent my time at home with my animals listening to old reruns of my favorite TV shows. Years of mental health issues had rendered me unfit to work in the eyes of the state, so many aspects of my life continued as usual. I did miss reading, and although I managed to find a few books in Braille, it wasn't that simple to learn. The small dots weren't that clear to me as someone who had recently gone blind. Walking the trails around my house was not an option anymore either. That was then, though. Today something changed that I didn't anticipate would happen. For the first time in over 785 days, I saw something. There have been stories since the Great Blinding of people regaining their sight. In all cases so far, it has been attributed to an overactive imagination. I must admit that even I have been fooled into thinking I was seeing something. You catch what looks like a flash of light, but it quickly fades, and you are reminded that you are still blind and that it has been the case for over a year now. But today was different. I saw the flash of light, but it quickly expanded to cover my entire field of view. I had to remind myself that I had a field of view again. I was amazed at how much I could see again, but startled at how forward everything felt. In my blindness, I experienced my world in 360 degrees. Now I was seeing only what was in front of me, and I noticed how unaware I was of this before. My ears were still trained to the world of the blind, however, so I found myself more aware of my surroundings than I remembered being before the Great Blinding. Words started to appear in my vision, at first unfamiliar, but then more clear as the image of what each letter meant reappeared in my mind's eye. I had forgotten what letters looked like. "Do not tell them that you can see," were the words scrawled on my wall. The writing was brown and it had no stench. I looked around to see if there was evidence that someone had entered my room while I slept, but I soon realized that the substance was dried and old. Someone wrote this on my wall a long time ago, and I had no idea why. I crept out of my room and realized that the sun was starting to set. After so long without sight, I wasn't surprised my sleeping cycle was so off. For me, it felt like early morning. The sky was illuminated with streamers of light, and everywhere people wandered through the streets heading for work. The setting sun turned the sky a rich burgundy, striped with its golden rays. There were no stars in this sky. In the distance, the trees danced, casting their long shadows on the surrounding fields. Looking closer, I realized they were actually dancing. Tall branches were swaying with their movements as they spun around one another and held each other's arms. Nearby, the people continued with their lives, unaware of the beings in their midst. Translucent birds flew high in the sky and shattered against the stone clouds, only to congeal and reform as a different bird, their chirps mimicking those of any birds I knew of before the Great Blinding. Orbs of light illuminated and disappeared as they moved through the air, sometimes passing through people unbeknownst to them. There were no roads or vehicles in the street. The asphalt and gravel were replaced with fields of grass. Despite this, my feet clattered on the ground as if it were still made of stone. I was so absorbed in my changed surroundings, it was hard to take in. In the distance, I heard whispers, and as I narrowed my eyes, I caught sight of a person waving at me to come near. I approached with caution, not knowing who or what they might be. "Get in here," they pointed at my house, "before they notice me." I retreated through the door and faced the man who was invading my home. "Do you have any idea what you are looking at?" He spoke quietly and stared out the window. The red glare of the night sky cast his face in a bloodied shadow. "You have entered the world of the dead." He closed the blinds. "You are witnessing things you were never supposed to see." Wow, okay, that was part one. And this is fascinating. We're getting so much detail about the world that it's become. And there's a bit of a scary aspect to it, a little bit of a horror aspect to it, I guess, of entering the world of the dead. But at the same time, you've got these beautiful imageries of birds shattering against clouds and then reforming. You've got trees that are quite literally dancing with each other. How magnificent. Wow, that's beautiful. And also that beginning, that intro of where you sort of have these people trying their hardest to fight the inevitable and to stay awake for as long as possible so that they don't lose their sight. That's a very human thing to do, I feel like. So I very much so enjoyed that intro. And also, again, still leaving things very vague and then, I don't know, drip feeding us a little bit more information at the very end where it's saying, "You have entered the world of the dead." That is so fascinating. That is so fascinating to see that now they've been essentially, isekai'd into like a whole different world with this sudden newfound ability to see again. And also what's interesting is that it introduces the concept of how people have been able to see, like, this is not the first person. There have been people before them. So what happened to those people? Like, clearly they've heard about this as someone who was blind and not the first person to regain their vision. So I'm so curious to know, like, what happened to those other people who regained their sight, because there were stories of them. Like, what happened? Are they doing anything special in particular now that they are one of the few sightless or people with sight in a community of sightless people? It's very fascinating. So I think that they have a part 2, and as far as I could tell, I couldn't find a second part. I couldn't find any additional part after the second part. So we'll read part 2, but I haven't found another one. So we'll see. And there have been comments from like a year ago saying like, "Oh, can you continue this?" So I think we're still waiting. All right, so 3 years ago, Cricket Jacked writes The Great Blinding Part 2. But I stammered, "But how is this possible? The interior of my home was familiar to me, unlike the world in which I found myself." "The world of the dead?" The man stared at me, his inscrutable expression offering no clues. "Yes," he raised his voice, "this is the world of the dead." He peeked outside from between the curtains. "They're watching us right now." A flash of light cast shadows into the room. Cast shadows into the room. He leapt back from the window in alarm. "They're looking for any sign from us that we are aware of our true location." He turned to me and grabbed my arms. "It is important that you never indicate to the others that you can now see." He released me. "Otherwise they will take you away." "Where will I go?" I shuddered at the idea of being removed from my home. "Where will they take me?" "That I unfortunately do not know." He shuddered. His whole body tittered with nervous energy. "Those who have returned to sight only to be immediately taken, I have never seen again." He released my arms. "That is why it is important that you do not let them know that you can see." My room felt cold, something I only now noticed. I could see my breath escape me in a cold vapor. I knew it wasn't cold enough for that, which left me wondering just how different this world was from the one I had known. Its very physical properties were unlike the old world. Reality felt like rape in this world. Like any moment I could pull away its surface and find the real world underneath. I slowly reached out to touch this veneer, only pausing out of fear at the last possible moment. I wondered if this was just another dream, but some part of my core self understood that this was not the case. This was the new world. Somehow all of humanity found itself here, unbeknownst to all but those who could see. He whispered close to my ears, his wide eyes trained on mine with fear. "Your neighbor was taken recently, you know?" I inched away as he spoke. 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact. I felt his facial hair, long and erratic, tickle my neck as he spoke. His breath smelled rotten, as if he too were dead. 2 weeks ago, I stammered. "How was that possible?" I stepped further away from him. "I spoke to him yesterday." He waved for me to follow him towards the window. I obeyed. I slowly leaned towards the gap and saw a creature, pale, translucent, with pink Venetian webbing throughout slide across my yard to my door. I felt the man pull me away from the window. "He's coming," he whispered frantically. "Act as you did before." He stepped out of the living room and disappeared. I heard the knock. It was exactly how Francis knocked. My neighbor. Strange how we all grew accustomed to recognizing people by the sound of their footsteps or the way they knocked, but I knew that was not Francis. I saw the creature walk up to my door. I was so afraid. I couldn't bring myself to answer the door. I stood frozen in the center of the living room. The creature knocked again. "Hey, buddy." Francis. No, this is not Francis. "Hey, are you all right? I heard some scuffling outside your house." I peeked through the curtain at the creature. Its pink Venetian pulsed rapidly, almost as if in irritation. "I just want to make sure you're okay." The creature slid over to the window. My window. I shuffled over to the center of the living room and closed my eyes for a moment. Breathe. Just take your time. I unfocused my eyes and wandered towards the front door, tracing my footsteps as I had done the day before. "Yeah, everything is all right, I suppose." I forced a laugh. It was awkward, but that wasn't unusual for me, so I went with it. I pulled the door open. As good as it can get, right? The door creaked open, and I kept my gaze down, ignoring the view in my periphery. Not Francis spoke. "Oh, that's good. What happened out there?" So much concern in its voice. How does it manage it? I paused, trying to come up with an excuse. "I haven't been feeling very well. I had another panic attack this morning." Believable. Definitely believable. The real Francis has seen his fair share of my panic attacks, so this creature should know. One of its tendrils reached out and touched my shoulders. I nearly flinched, but passed it off as me reaching for something. I grabbed my umbrella just out of view. The tendril felt exactly like a hand. Strange how the rest of my senses lie to me. "I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't realize it's been happening lately." And that's where the second part ends. Wow, this is a fascinating explanation, or what's it called? Expansion upon the first part. Where the first part, it's kind of like an intro where you get teased at the very end, being like, "Oh, so we're in the world of the dead. What does that mean?" And you get all of these questions, and the second part kind of expands upon it a little bit to talk about like what exactly is monitoring people, what happened. It answered my question of what happened to those people. That was very interesting. So apparently they've been taken, never seen again, including the neighbor. And so the neighbor got replaced by this creature, presumably who you don't want this creature to know that you can now see. That's fascinating. And I loved that imagery, or rather that sort of dissonance in imagery, I suppose, between the touch on the shoulder, but the fact that it's a tendril, and I'm almost like, recoiling out of fear for this guy, being like, "Oh my goodness, don't get caught. Like, what will happen to you when you get caught?" But then there's also that part of me that's like, well, if you do get caught, what happens? I'm kind of curious to know, like if you get caught and you get taken away, like do you just die, or like what happens? But also I understand that's like one of those things that you don't want to find out by fucking around and finding out. You kind of want to, you probably want to like maybe witness something happening, as awful as that might be. But alas, this is very interesting. I love the expansion on it. I love the detail, and I love the very realistic dialogue that's happening. I feel like this makes a lot of sense. You've got this weird guy that kind of appeared out of nowhere being like, "Hush, sir, you gotta listen to me." and like speaking in hushed tones and explaining this. And then he just kind of like skitters off, I guess. That's very interesting. He stepped out of the living room and disappeared. Like, where did this guy go? Like, he was in your house. And like, I don't know if like if he left, if there's a back door that he left through. Like, what the hell, man? Very random. But how did he catch this guy just as he was discovering that he got his sight back? That's fascinating. So yeah, interesting. A lot of, a lot of opportunity to expand upon this. So I can see why a lot of people wanted more. I see why a lot of people wanted more. And so perhaps in the future, if Cricket Jacked posts again, then we might be able to revisit this because this is very fascinating. There was another entry that was written by a user named Matig123, Matig123, also 7 years ago on the original, and it looks like they've got 4 parts, and they've got their own subreddit called Mati Writes, Mati Writes. So at some point I should probably go check out what they've written elsewhere, but let's get started on this entry over here. I was maimed in the Great Blinding, just like everybody else. One day the world was a colorful pastel full of life and movement, and the next day we were blind. Not just some of us, everyone was blind. Color became something that was instead of something that is. I could pick up an apple and not know if it was red or green or yellow, or maybe it was just something made to feel like an apple. For a time, I would talk about the delicate red feathers of a cardinal I could hear chirping outside my bedroom window. Soon as it was just a cardinal, and finally it was just a bird, we lost color, and with the color left a little part of us. I felt the life trickle out of me the longer I was enveloped in darkness. Walks at the park were monotonous, now meaningless, as the darkness there was as dark as the darkness anywhere else. I could feel the leaves, the little veins that coursed up from the stem, and the ridges and the edges of the bark of a tree. I could hear the splash of water when I tossed a rock into the pond, but I could no longer see the ripples of the water or the ducks scurrying away. I knew there should be a meaning to all this, some entity encouraging me to learn to utilize my other senses or to appreciate the sounds of the world, but all I could think of was how beautiful it all used to be. It has been 2 years since the blinding. 2 years of darkness. 2 years of indoctrination, verbal illumination, as they called it. We were told what we could see, or what we would see if we could see. We were told how it should look, and what it should mean, and why things were never quite the way we thought they were. It has been 2 years since the blinding, and it has been 2 hours since I opened my eyes and things were different again. My world was no longer black when I awoke. Suddenly a long unfamiliar contrast between my eyes being open and my eyes being closed. It was off-putting but relieving, terrifying but intriguing. There was color again. Not the beautiful oranges and reds and greens of autumn leaves, but at least there was more than just darkness. The walls were gray and the world was foggy. Shapes turned to letters as I read the words scrawled on my bedroom walls. "Don't tell them you can see," I deciphered, barely construing the different shades of gray that outlined the words. So I didn't. The paranoia overtook me as I hid my vision from whatever power had rendered me blind. I did my best to play it off, to not look at the little gray bird perched on my windowsill, and to hide my excitement from my colleagues. I went about my day as I would a blind man, using my hands like feelers as I groped and grasped my way about. I tapped away at the keyboard on my desk, the lifeless machine reciting back to me my keystrokes and any information it considered relevant to my role. The firm had adopted seamlessly to the blinding, installing backup measures as if they had been preparing them for years. I peeked. It was the same monotony it had always been. In the bathroom, I saw the words again, etched into the mirror they hadn't bothered to remove. Why would they, after all? We were all blind and mired in the misery of endless introspection. Mirror or no mirror, it made no difference. Everything was gray, the colors no more diverse than light gray and dark gray. But there were those words again. Don't tell them you can see. I just stood there looking at myself. My clothes were gray, my face was gray, my eyes that had once been the faintest shade of blue were gray and lifeless as the darkness we were supposed to be in. I shook my head. I fought back the sadness. I had assumed until now that color still was. If the darkness ever ended, the birds I heard would still be yellow and blue and red, and the plants would still have green leaves and purple flowers. Instead, they were all gray. I told myself that it was my vision, not that somebody had removed the colors themselves from our beautiful world. I found comfort in convincing myself that my vision was still impaired. The alternative was far worse. Outside the office, the street was gray and the sky was gray, and the buildings that stretched towards that gray sky blended into the clouds, just a slightly different shade of gray. But as I looked out, a flash of color caught my eye. A man stood in the shadows of a building, looking out at me from an alleyway as gray as everything else. His shirt was red and his pants were blue, and even from this distance, I could see the pink of his skin. It dawned on me that if he had color, then the birds really were gray, and my curiosity struggled to overcome the overwhelming sadness I felt. He stared, and when I finally met his eyes, he waved me towards him and disappeared into the alley. Oh boy, but you're not supposed to tell anybody that you can see. Don't tell them you can see, so what might happen to him now? This is fascinating, and I love the fixation on color. There's a lot of talk of the supernatural and of when you open your eyes again, everything is just so vastly different. You have monsters, you have the dead, you have fantastical creatures, you have orbs of light illuminating the sky. But in this one, there's a fixation on the grayscale, on the white and black nature of the world around them. And also, what's interesting is the way that this author describes the emotional reaction to it. A lot of that rejection, a lot of that non-acceptance of what's happening. And I loved that one line that said, "So I didn't." I deciphered, barely construing the different shades of gray that outlined the words, "So I didn't." The paranoia overtook me as I hid my vision from whatever power had rendered me blind, and I loved that transition into their reaction where it's it doesn't linger upon that singular moment where they first discovered that they could see again. It explains overall the broad, experience of what they observed and how they reacted to it. So that's fascinating. And I also really love that little part about mirrors being meaningless, that little detail about this one object that it is useless to them now, but they still left there because why would they take it away? It didn't matter. And that sudden dreariness, the way that life was drained out of everybody with that color. That is fascinating. That's so cool. And I'm glad that it looks like they've written more. They've got a part 2 and a part 3 linked, and hopefully I can access them. And it looks like they even have a part 5. Wow, okay, cool. That's lovely. All right. So, The Great Blinding Part 2 as written by Matig123. Or Matty G123, perhaps. All right, so it begins... I patiently waited for the signal to indicate that it was safe to cross the street. Autonomous cars whizzed by, sightless people sitting idly. The alley was empty, and for a moment I thought I had imagined the colored man. I didn't quite trust my vision, much less the dash of color in this gray world, but halfway into the alley a door sat propped open, and a face quietly stared at me from the darkness. I glanced behind me surreptitiously as I approached, and he pulled the door shut behind me. For a fleeting moment, I panicked as I was pitched into darkness once again. Then a light flickered on, and I found myself in a gray room leading to a similarly gray staircase. "Don't tell them you can see," I read on the wall once again. I shuddered. The man was about my age, but his eyes were more youthful and alive than mine had been in the mirror that morning. They had color. He held out a hand that I rudely ignored. "Welcome," he said with a coy smile, shrugging and putting his hand in his pocket. I didn't smile back. I had more questions than seemed appropriate to ask right then. Part of me felt like he was my savior, but part of me felt like I was being dragged into something more sinister and illicit than I felt comfortable with. There wasn't much other reason to lead somebody into an alley and down a staircase. "Come on," he said, with a nod of his head. He turned to lead me down the stairs, but I hesitated. "Who are you?" I demanded. "How are you colored? How did you find me? Who is them?" I stayed where I was, tensed as if to make a break for the doorway, if his answers were not to my satisfaction. The words all referred to them. But what if being sightless was saving me from them? What if my best approach was to keep pretending I couldn't see and go about my days as I had for the past 2 years? A quick aside, I feel like if I were him and I suddenly saw a guy who was colorless waving me over, I would try to ignore him because I would be so afraid that he was them. Like, who is them? Maybe he's them. So it's interesting that this character has just gone ahead and followed him. He is far braver than I. He chuckled as he turned back towards me. "I'm Adam," he answered with a smile. "I can answer some of your questions where it's safer. Others I don't know the answer to." "How did you find me?" The other answers could wait, this one could not. He tilted his head at me curiously. "I didn't," he responded mysteriously. "You found me." I shook my head at him. That was absurd. The words were on my wall. He was waiting across the alley. He was looking right at me. "Whatever this is," he said with a wave of his hand, "this great blinding, it's loosening its grip. We're finding more and more people like you and me. Some can see again, some can even see color, some can even be colored." He was raising more questions with each sentence and barely getting around to answering any of the ones I had asked. "You got lucky," he said finally by the way of answer. "If you hadn't seen me, you would still be wandering around, not knowing what the hell was going on. I'm a watcher. My job is to find the people who can see." He paused for a moment as if lamenting the countless people who might have sight again, but were just going about their lives pretending to be blind. Or perhaps they had let them find out, and that's why they couldn't be found. "Downstairs we have a colorer. He might be able to give you color too." That was all I had to hear. I nodded and followed him down the stairs and through another doorway. I was greeted by a normal-looking room. Not normal like the gray office I had been in earlier that day, but normal like the way things used to be. The walls were painted green and red and rainbow. There was a table with a stack of beautiful pictures. People bustled around in conversation, most of them fully colored. Adam sat me at the table and told me he would be back in a moment. I thumbed through the pictures, admiring the landscapes and the brilliant colors. "Would you like a drink with those?" a voice asked. I glanced up to a grandfatherly old man. "They're to help recruits relax," he explained, gesturing to the photographs. They were relaxing. I had missed the oceans and the mountains and the trees even more than I thought. "Do you have juice? Orange juice?" I asked hopefully. He laughed boisterously. "We do," he said when he was done laughing. "You aren't the first person to ask for it. It's still orange, you know." It was, and I couldn't help but marvel at the liquid in the glass that was brought to me. "I see you've met Charles," Adam said when he returned. "He's our resident colorer. In case you're refusing to shake his hand too, I suggest you shake it. We might be pleasantly surprised." I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, and by way of apology I stood and shook Adam's hands first. I mumbled an apology and he laughed it off. "Drew," I said, introducing myself. I was a bit overwhelmed and suspicious. I still am, to be honest. Charles extended a hand which I eagerly took. "Call me Chuck," he said with a grin. I looked down in awe as the color started to seep into my arm, the hue I hadn't seen in 2 years returning to my gray skin. I was left speechless for a moment. And then for another moment when Adam turned me towards a mirror and I could see the color of my skin and hair in full. "What happened out there?" I stammered finally. The world was gray and lifeless from top to bottom, the trees and the people and the clouds and everything in between. Yet here they had found the secret to color, the secret they seemed to be selfishly holding instead of spreading it back into the world again. For the first time, Adam's smile faltered and he directed me back to the table. He wrung his hands for a moment as if agonizing over the right words to use. "We don't know. The only difference between you and us is that you don't know what you don't know. We've been working to get answers, but..." His sentence tapered off, and I took it to mean that there were more unknowns than knowns at this point. "We call ourselves the Resistance," he chuckled at the wordplay. "We don't know what or who we're resisting, but we figure it's something." I looked around. There were dozens of people going in and out of what seemed to be a network of rooms. I caught a glance of the next room over, which was painted in the same bright colors. People sat at computers, furiously working away. What are they doing? Communications had to be tracked. They were tracked before the Great Blinding, and there was no reason to think they wouldn't be tracked now. Even if they were using secured connections, somebody had to be seeing the work that they were doing. Adam seemed to be glad to hear a question he could provide the answer to. They're trying to find answers, it seems. Like, at some level, somebody has to have answers. Everything was too ready for the blinding. There was barely a hiccup up there, he said, pointing up towards the surface. Except for people like you and me. I had gotten the same vibe at the firm. There had been disaster recovery procedures in place for a disaster that nobody should have ever foreseen. Everybody seems to have gone dark for a year, but then people started to see again. We don't know where it started, but we all eventually bumped into each other and started recruiting. Now we each have a role. What will mine be? I asked curiously. I clearly couldn't color since I probably would have been able to color myself. This cell of the resistance movement seemed to already have enough watchers to fill their ranks. We'll work to figure that out. He stood abruptly and led me through another door into a gray bedroom. I saw the writing on the walls again and felt my heart start pounding. A young boy sat at a desk near a bed, duly listening to a book, his sightless eyes staring blankly at a wall. His skin was a familiar gray pallor and my stomach churned uncomfortably. "Dad?" the boy asked, pausing the book and looking our way. His eyes didn't quite settle on us. He couldn't be much older than 6. I imagined the panic he must have felt waking up blind one morning. We had all felt it, but as an adult I had the twisted comfort of knowing that we were all in the same situation. It would have made much less sense to a child. Adam sighed and seemed crestfallen. "Hey buddy," he answered quietly. "Drew here. He's going to hold your hand, okay?" The boy frowned but nodded and reached out blindly. "This is the first test," Adam explained. His eyes were sad but hopeful, as if he expected me to work some sort of magic. "I need you to hold his hands." I did as instructed, feeling the boy's small, soft hands in mine. "Now what?" "Chuck says you have to will the color into them. We don't let him near him. I need you to will the sight into him first." "Sight? Like will him to see?" Didn't work that way, I didn't think. The sight had come to me randomly, or at least it seemed like it did. I had woken up and suddenly the world was a little more normal than the previous evening. I thought back to yesterday, and if I had been jostled by anybody, or if a hand had lingered on mine for long enough to will the sight into me. There were always awkward encounters in a bustling city full of groping crowds of blind people, but if somebody had given me sight, I imagine they would have said something, or they would have been ready to recruit me the next day. Adam nodded. "Please just try. We think some people might be seers. They may be able to give sight." So I did as instructed, holding the boy's hands and willing him to see again. When I had exerted whatever efforts it seemed appropriate to exert on such a futile task, I let go and turned back towards Adam. His eyes were damp, but he gave me a half smile of appreciation. "Thank you," he said, directing me towards the door to the room. I paused and turned around as I heard Adam helping his son to his feet. "All right, buddy, time for bed now," he said to the boy. "We'll see if you feel better in the morning." That was the end of part 2. Oh man, I am loving this story so far. I'm loving the characterization. I'm loving the different personalities that we're seeing, like Chuck or Charles, the Drew character, who's our main character, kind of like being portrayed as kind of like a brusque, like he admits that he's rude at the beginning and was just like, oh man, I was so overwhelmed. And we've got Adam, who's this like caretaker of sorts, who brings Drew into this new world of color and filled with things. And also there's like a almost like superpower element to it, where you've got this dark, like gray, bleary world, and then you've got these particular people who can bring color back into it. It's not just that they like can regain the ability to see and see in color, but color, it becomes an ability, something that you can enable and like will into others. So that's so fascinating. And that moment where Drew is looking into the mirror and sees himself again, contrasted with the way that he described mirrors beforehand, where mirrors were meaningless. What point was there if nobody could see? And now it brought him such joy to see his own eye color and his hair color and his skin again. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I hope at the end it seems like maybe there's something more to Drew. Maybe Drew could be someone who gives people back their sight, but we don't really know yet. They kind of leave a cliffhanger on that. So I'm so curious. And thank goodness part 3 is in fact available. So we'll continue taking a look at the story. It continues. I couldn't resist the urge to slip out of the base early the next morning to catch a glimpse of a sunrise over water. Security was surprisingly relaxed for a resistance movement. As an aside, I'm also curious as well as to, like, if you've got people with color suddenly walking around, won't they, whoever they are, find out? Like, isn't that kind of problematic, you know? Like, I don't really know how exactly it works, and like, it seems that perhaps with the lax security of the resistance movement, that, like, they just haven't perceived any particular threat, like, nobody's been taken, but, yeah, it looks like nobody really knows what's happening still. In spite of the weight that the words on the wall seemed to carry over everybody, the mystery of whatever entity had caused the blinding and written the words seemed to result in indifference when it came to guarding the door. A watcher sitting at the door shrugged as I crept out the door. "Be careful out there," he said sleepily. "Careful of what?" He shrugged and waved his hand vaguely. "Them. If them was people, the guard was ill-suited to do anything. If there was something else..." I shook my head in frustration and stepped out into the gray alleyway. At the far end, I could see people bustling by without even glancing down towards me. I had to remind myself that they were blind. All of them were blind. I fell right into step behind them, or with them, doing my best to avoid collisions without drawing attention to myself. Several times, somebody would stare right through me, or right at me, and I would feel my heart flutter, but the looks were consistently empty and sightless. I found myself drawn to a riverbank where I had spent many hours walking on lunch breaks and before then when I needed breaks from the studies. Benches lined the walkway that ran along the water's edge. Once there would have been lovers strolling along hand in hand or parents walking as their children skipped along in front. That would be hazardous now, given the water and the propensity of children to get themselves into dangerous situations. It was emptier now, but a few people still walked along, occasionally grasping for a stone and tossing it into the water. I smiled at the ripples that I could finally see again, and I pitied those unseeing souls. They still said excuse me when they bumped into somebody. They still felt the warmth of the sun on their faces but were blind to its brilliant splendor. I could see it through the fog now, the gray haze unyielding. The same wretched words were scrawled on the benches on the walkway. "Don't tell them you can see," repeated over and over again as I walked. I passed the occasional walker in the other direction, and always making sure to stay away from the edge of the water. They ignored me, and I figured they just couldn't hear me. In the distance, a well-dressed woman approached, her pantsuit a dark shade of gray that contrasted sharply with her deathly pale skin. She wore sunglasses, an odd fashion choice given the dim sun, and an even more bizarre choice considering she was blind. We were on a clear collision course, clear to me at least, and I shuffled to avoid her. She moved with me in an awkward dance, and her thin gray lips turned into a smear. "Why don't we have a chat?" she asked, pointing a fingernail, as black as her hair, towards the nearest bench. I felt the bile rise in my throat as she smoothly removed her sunglasses, revealing brown eyes almost dark enough to match the rest of her discolored being. She smiled at me cruelly, knowing she had caught me in some sort of trap reserved for those who could see. I glanced around, and she shook her head. "Maybe don't," she snarked, quashing any ideas I had of fleeing. I sighed and sat, looking out over the waves that lapped gently against the concrete side of the walkway. She sat with me in silence for a moment, and we watched a pair of gulls amble by. "It's nice, isn't it?" Her sunglasses were back on now. Ooh, okay, so Guy got caught as soon as he went out the first time. Guy was not being particularly discreet, I guess, so I guess we're gonna find out what happens. I nodded. It would be nicer in color, but I was glad to even be able to see. "You're one of them, aren't you?" The words marred the view, a constant reminder of this twisted reality, and I wondered what terrible fate would meet me now that they knew. "Oh my," she responded with a chuckle and a shake of her head. "No, not at all. I have no idea who they are." "Then who are you? Why are we chatting?" She glanced sideways, casting me a long, pensive look. "Do you know what happens when they discover somebody can see?" I shook my head. I knew people just disappeared sometimes, but that had always been the case, even before the blinding. She pursed her lips and nodded as if this proved her point. "It's not good." I arched my eyebrows at her, prompting her to expand her explanation. "They die, to keep it simple." "How? You must have seen it. Somebody must have seen it." She seemed to know more than she was letting on, and it made me doubt everything she had said so far. "Something in the fog." She paused, looking out over the river to where the fog thickened so much you couldn't see the other side. "They disappear. Just like the world did for all of us 2 years ago. One minute you can see them, the next minute you can't." She shook her head like she dreaded the thought, having seen it so many times already. Then she switched gears, launching a renewed assault on the little bit I thought I knew. "You know that little group of yours? The Resistance, I think they call themselves?" I kept a straight face and neither confirmed nor denied. She shrugged. She seemed to already know the answer. "They're going to be the end of us." Wait a minute, I just realized that if she can see, this guy is clearly colored. Like, and I mean that in the sense that, like, he's got all of his color back on him. And so, like, isn't that just, like, asking to be found? That's like, because obviously, I don't know, like, well, I guess less obviously, but, like, we presume, you know, that, like, they can see and that they're, like, watching you guys and like, they're trying to, you know, catch anybody in the act of if they're able to see, and then they die if they get caught. But, like, if you have color on you and then everything else is gray around you, don't you get caught, like, instantly? Isn't that just, like, marking yourself, like a red flag on a white background? Like, or rather, in this case, a red flag on a gray background? Like, am I crazy about that? I feel like that's wild. I feel like that's also very, like, you know, irresponsible, like, that people just started doing that. As much as it is also, like, you know, admirable, because having your color back is also, like, such a big part of your identity. I feel like by stripping away that color and turning everything into grayscale, it's now, like, melded everybody together in this one vast sort of amalgamation of society. So, I mean, it's interesting, like, from an identity standpoint, but, you know, I'm kind of agreeing with this woman over here who's saying that they're going to be the end of us. I gawked at her. That was absurd. I had seen dozens of them colored and seeing, and they were perfectly fine. How? They just want things how they were. There was color. People could see. There's nothing wrong with wanting that back. She laughed again, that laugh that I found exceedingly unpleasant. It was as if she was mocking me, not just for my ignorance, but for the dreams I had of returning things to some semblance of normality. "No, that's not my job," she corrected, enunciating the "my" in an alarming way. I felt a chill run up my spine. We try to take a preventative approach instead of facing that ridiculously named resistance movement head-on. A preventative approach? You kill people before they can see? That doesn't make you any different than whoever they are, I said, waving my hand around. It seemed to be the widely accepted gesture for referring to them. She sighed at me. "Stop jumping to conclusions. What we know is a lot simpler than you think. We don't kill anybody. We don't have to kill. We just locate seers and kill them." I interrupted again, trying to finish her sentence. She shook her head and sighed again. "Stop doing that. We don't kill them. We just prevent them from giving more people sight. We keep it under control. We make sure we don't get discovered." "You're scared." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, as true as her skin was pale. Your fear makes you the enemy. You're keeping people from seeing. She looked at me curiously, and she looked more human than she had up until now. "I don't want to be blind again," she said simply after contemplating for a moment. "You don't either. You wouldn't be here, admiring this little bit of a view otherwise, right?" I sighed mournfully. She wasn't wrong. I had never quite grown accustomed to not seeing it like others seemed to have. I missed the colors and the movement too much. I couldn't stand the idea of losing it again. "Right," I said finally. "I don't want to be blind again either." This is interesting. So this is an interesting turn. We've got like a couple of different factions going on, and this was the end of part 3, by the way. So we've got a couple of different factions going on, one of which is the Resistance, which is trying to bring back color to the whole world and, like take a more like hands-on approach of like, yeah, we're gonna fight this thing head on. And then it seems that whatever faction that this woman is a part of, it's more hesitant and it's more like cautious, which I think honestly, I'm personally inclined to agree with her perspective because, like, who knows what's going on? If it's so easy to just simply disappear, just simply die, then why would you want to then, be so upfront with having color on your person? Granted, clearly there have been quite a community of people who have survived underground who are going about their lives and have full color, including that man, Adam, that Drew met first, who brought Matt into that brought Drew into the Resistance in the first place. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I'm curious to see where this goes, so without further ado, let's go take a look at part 4. We were still sitting on the bench in silence as the sun reached its peak. The fog had given no solace, no little gap through which the sun could reach us unimpeded. I sat there, a reluctant and pensive prisoner, her a mysterious captor, each ignorant of the other's thoughts. Finally, we both moved to speak simultaneously, and I laughed awkwardly as she ignored my interruption and spoke anyways. "We could use your services," she said simply, not turning towards me. "Your discretion would be encouraged, of course, but your position could help guarantee everybody's survival." I shook my head. "I don't think you've been completely candid with me. I want answers. Then you'll get your answer." She considered my question for a moment before shrugging. I took it as an indication to continue. "The words, did you write them?" "I did not," she responded simply without expanding. I glowered at her, starting to understand the rules she was playing by. "Do you know who wrote them? And who are you?" I asked. "Carissa," she responded, "and yes, I do." I sighed and tenderly rubbed the bridge of my nose, cursing her stubborn taciturnity. She chuckled at my visible frustration and seemed to decide that she would humor me. "There are people. All they do is write." "Can they see?" She shook her head, and I looked at her in surprise. "No," she answered. "Often it's people who aren't quite right. I suggest steering clear if you bump into them." How did they get into my apartment? The words have been everywhere, on the floor, on the ceiling, on the walls. They were on the streets and on the sidewalks and on the walls. Whoever these writers were, they really wanted to make sure I saw their work, and if they had been in my apartment, I hadn't noticed, or they had come through when I was gone. Neither thought was particularly comforting. She cocked her head at me irritably and then picked up at a black fingernail in apparent boredom. This is a lot of questions for me to get one answer. When I stayed silent, she sighed with exasperation. "There are handlers who help them and direct them." She paused before deciding there was more to say. "This," she said, pointing a finger first to me and then to herself, "was not a coincidence. You have skills." She tapered off and reevaluated her words. "Not skills like me or a seer or a colorer. You have connections, and a position that happens to coincide with where we think the answers are." "The firm?" She nodded, and I felt vindicated by my suspicions that they had, in fact, been too prepared. This cult or organization had come to the same conclusion. "We need you to keep going to work. Keep pretending you're blind, obviously. Don't draw attention to yourself, and we need you to keep interacting with the Resistance. Tell them you're keeping an eye out for others. I don't care, just do as you're told. Help us find answers and keep seers away from the Resistance, and we'll both be happier for it." "Okay," I agreed, standing. "How will I find you?" I reached out a hand to seal the deal. She ignored it, and I sheepishly slipped it back into my pocket. Sorry to interrupt, but funny how there's kind of like a switch up there where now she's the one not taking the offered outstretched hand. That Adam has, not Adam, Drew, I'm mixing up the names. Drew has reached out. "Same way you did this time. I'll be here." I glanced behind me as I walked away, and the fog had almost completely concealed her. She was still sitting at the bench, staring impassively over the river. Had I not seen her eyes, I would still be convinced she was blind. That was the point, I guess. Convincing whoever they were that she couldn't see. I liked the idea of a safer approach to recovering our sight and discovering the cause of the great blinding, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease at being part of the systematic suppression of sight in the meantime. She had also all but confirmed that they had had a seer give me sight, so part of me felt I should be thankful for that. I weaved my way back through the crowd of laborers out getting lunch. It shocked me how little had changed in spite of everything being blind, or everybody being blind, and, as if for good measure, the world going gray. Cars still whizzed by, albeit driverless cars now, and stoplights still blinked, just slightly different shades of gray instead of red or green or yellow. Televisions in cafes and delis still ran the news, the background noise providing a sense of familiar comfort. At tables, people listened to books or to podcasts or chatted with similarly dressed associates. The spontaneity, catching somebody's eyes in a coffee shop or connecting over a book, seemed to have gone the way of their sight. In front of the office building where I worked, I paused. I resisted the urge to look upwards at the behemoth structure that eclipsed the sun even back when the fog didn't. Once familiar colleagues rushed by, their hair now overgrown or their makeup disregarded. I felt a twinge of suspicion too, wondering which of them might have known more about what would happen than they were letting on. From the corner of my eye, I could see a dash of color in the alleyway where the Resistance was headquartered duck back into the doorway to continue their watch. Where the Resistance had yesterday seemed brave and selfless, it now struck me as foolish and short-sighted. Adam's voice beside me caught me by surprise, and I realized I'd been staring in fascination through a window to a television. "Way to be subtle," he said with a grin, gripping my shoulder. I laughed it off, snapping my gaze away from the anchorman. His tie was impressively straight, and he stared fixedly at the camera, his eyes less empty than the eyes of the people around us. "Sorry," I mumbled. I glanced around furtively in case they had seen us. I turned back towards Adam. The sadness I had seen the previous night as he kissed his son goodnight was gone, replaced by the familiar cheeriness I had seen amongst the Resistance members. "How's your son?" I asked. I immediately winced. Misery loves company, and his smile drooped now. "Same old," he shrugged. "I guess you weren't the answer to our prayers," he added with a little chuckle. I laughed back humorlessly. "I could have told you that." He misread my reaction for self-pity and gave me a pat on the back. "Don't worry, Drew. We'll find a role for you yet." I shifted uncomfortably and avoided his gaze. "I have to get to work," I said lamely, pointing up at the building as I changed the subject. He stared at me in confusion. "For money, for food and rent, to live?" I waved my hand around, encompassing everything around us as evidence. He must have thought I was joking. "We supply everything you need. We have people who acquire it." It was a bold-faced euphemism for theft. Everybody had heard reports of the increased looting since the Great Blinding. "You're with the Resistance now." I brushed off his hand that was still on my shoulder. "I'll be there after work, Adam," I said, and I slipped into the building. The lobby was bustling with people, and I maneuvered my way past them and then badged through the turnstiles to reach the elevator. An attendant stood patiently inside, waiting by the buttons. I looked them up and down, and he smiled at me pleasantly. "Which floor?" 16, I answered. Blind fingers reached deftly for the right button. I thanked the attendant as I got off. I was less than a quarter of the way up the building, quite some distance from the C-suite offices at the top, but some sort of outline of a plan was beginning to formulate. "Sorry I'm late," I said meekly to my boss, peeking my head into his office. He was facing the wall and squeezing a stress ball. I think he did that more than he worked. He didn't care if I arrived at 8 or at noon or if I didn't show up at all. "No worries, Drew," he responded with a smile, pausing for a moment to turn his head my way. Then his attention was back to the stress ball. He had been squeezing it and bouncing it off the wall for 2 years now. I shook my head and made my way back to the elevators. 54, I told the attendant. He looked my way oddly, and I felt obliged to explain why I was back. "Boss wanted me to run something up," I explained. He smiled politely back, and as the elevator started to move, I slipped a hand behind him and pressed another button. "Thanks," I said as the elevator came to a stop on the 54th floor, and I stepped forwards. The doors opened to an office space not much different than my own, and then slid to a close again. Then the elevator continued its trajectory upward, and I could see the attendant shifting in confusion at the upwards movement. The elevator heralded our arrival to the topmost floor with the usual ding, and I slipped out before the attendant realized he hadn't been alone. "Sorry, Sandra," he said apologetically to the receptionist. "I must have pressed the wrong button." He seemed to doubt himself, but I stayed silent, and he shrugged and the doors closed shut behind me. The top floor and everything on it was as gray as anywhere else, and I felt disappointed to have apparently now stumbled across some sort of eye-opening revelation. Maybe I expected a circle of colored executives plotting how to keep us all blind. There was nothing of the sort. Everything was gray, except the receptionist, who stared straight ahead unseeing but basked in a full array of colors. At some point, she seemed to have been graced by a colorer, and not even realized it since no seer had stumbled upon her. Her eyes were adorned in carefully applied mascara, and her cheeks rosy with blush. I carefully stepped aside out of what would have once been her line of sight. Her eyes didn't follow me, and I let out a silent sigh of relief. She sat still as a statue, hands clasped idly on her lap atop a professional brown skirt. If it weren't for the occasional blink, I would have thought she was a mannequin. To the left, there was a black wall. I knew the building extended further that way, but there was no indication of a door, and asking the receptionist to allow me through didn't seem a viable option. So I went right, towards the glass-walled conference room with a dozen chairs set neatly around a wooden table in the glass-walled office that would have once overlooked the city. Now the sight was obscured by fog, so thick that one could not quite see the ground, and instead only the tallest other buildings peeked out over the fog below. Above the fog, the sky was blue. I stared speechless for a moment, admiring the simple beauty of it. Then I busied myself with rifling through the contents of the desk, a task that proved fruitless and left me frustrated. There were client contracts and pages of notes, but nothing about the blinding. Back in the lobby of the top floor, the receptionist was still sitting perfectly still, seemingly oblivious of the presence pacing back and forth in front of her. There was a stairwell near the elevator, but the door was locked, and for a moment I thought she might have heard my clumsy attempt at opening the door. Pressing the button for the elevator would make a sound, then she would surely hear, and alarms would go off, and I would find myself escorted off the premises. Or worse, I glanced around nervously. She looked amused. "I take it you didn't have a plan for leaving?" she asked, and I felt my blood run cold and the color drain from my face when I heard her voice. She was looking straight towards me now, her head pivoting mechanically as I stepped from side to side. I shook my head and backed towards the elevator and grasped backwards for the button. She stood robotically and walked around the desk before stiffly turning towards me. Her eyes never deviated from staring straight ahead. The elevator dinged and the doors opened, and I sensed a presence behind me. Something ominous and inhuman, and definitely not the elevator attendant. The receptionist was close enough that I could see the tiny imperfections in her red lipstick and her trembling eyes as she forced herself to not look past me at whatever the elevator had brought up. "What did the words say?" she hissed. "Don't tell them you can see," I responded, reciting the phrase I must have seen several thousand times by now. She chuckled darkly and nodded, her eyes still fixed on me. "Well, now they know," she whispered, and she turned back towards her desk. Fog began to dissipate from the elevator, and little tendrils began to creep past me, snaking around my arms and legs. And that, my friends, is the end of part 4. Ooh, it got pretty dangerous there. I will say, though, I'm a little frustrated with our main character Drew here, because what the hell do you mean you just immediately booked it for the top floor? Like, I get that you kind of want answers right away, and I get that you want to know more information, but at the same time, I feel that's rather reckless, you know? I feel like that's not something that you do right away. You like, ever heard of the slow burn? And so, you know, I feel like that wasn't exactly the greatest idea, but, you know, I suppose things happen. Fine. And I'm curious to know how this continues. And I'm also just endlessly fascinated, as I said before, by the different factions that are happening, and now we're gonna probably get some more answers as to like what the being is, what them is. A sense of peace came over me briefly, but just briefly. Then colors flashed, the round blue logo of the company, the rainbow assortment inside the candy jar on the receptionist's desk, the geometric patterns of the carpet flooring. The fog was blue and it was black, and it swirled and churned even where moments before there had been no fog. Then it went dark again. A darkness so black that even a hint of gray would have been comforting. I pulled against the sinewy tendrils wrapped around my arms and legs. I felt them tear and dissolve and momentarily release their hold just to wrap around me again. They tore my clothes and left long gashes down my arms that seeped black blood. Lights flashed, and the world was gray now, her brown skirt gray in my hands, the deathly pallor of the colorless and sightless masses outside, and the logo and the candies back to a muted shade. Figures moved in my periphery, shadowy creatures of the fog, humanoid, but diffusing as quickly as I could discern them into tentacles and reaching arms. There was color again. I could see the terror in her eyes and the agitated red luster of her cheeks as I clutched her blonde hair and pulled her back towards me desperately. Oh, you grabbed her. Okay. The wisps of gray grasped furiously, hungering for something or someone. I saw them rip into her face, tearing at her eyes and ears as they took a hold of her arms and legs. Her blood was as black as mine. Everything went dark. Blackness. Oppressive and ominously familiar, but I faced it with renewed resolve. It was different than the great blinding when the shock was overwhelming and I had staggered into the street to see if anybody else's sight had been cruelly torn from them. Then, people had confirmed numbly, indifferently. Something had compelled them to stumble their way back to work and continue as if nothing was amiss. They told me it was for the best. They had told me it was necessary. My blind quest for answers had predictably led me nowhere in spite of being fueled by anger and confusion. Search results were curated and censored, and the answers were unsatisfactory and concocted, intended to assuage people's fears and keep them from prying any further. Eventually, I just went about my quotidian routine, internally incensed but externally acquiescent and subservient, like we were supposed to be, like most everybody else was. Robotically performing their expected duties like lifeless slaves to some invisible master. This time would be different. I had seen what they had done to the world, but I had also seen that there could still be color. I had connected with the resistance, and I had connected with Carissa, and I knew that there were people out there who could restore my sight. I had hope now, and I knew that something could be done, unlike when the blinding occurred and hope eventually gave way to helpless resignation. My arms were free, released from the fog's fateful grip. I groped blindly, my hands settling on a motionless body. "Don't touch me, please," a voice said quietly, meekly. It was the receptionist, as alive as me. I was surprised but relieved, grateful that pulling her into the fog in my place hadn't killed her, but fully expecting her to be gone. She was, in a sense, at least to my eyes. The flat apathy of her voice was the same as I had heard in coworkers and family members and strangers when the fog first rendered us blind and thereafter. Gone was her amusement as she cornered me and toyed with my desperation at the end of my impulsive exploration. Gone was the fascinated tremor of her voice as she ruthlessly sacrificed me to the fog. My fingers lingered on the steely cool of her leg for a moment before I moved them away. "Sorry," I mumbled awkwardly. I was apologizing for touching her. I was apologizing for pulling her into the fog and allowing it to violate her how it had. If it was anything similar to what it had done to me, she deserved an apology. I was apologizing for being blind and unable to know quite where my hands would land again. I heard her sigh and stand and straighten her shirt. "Security will be here shortly," she reported simply. I heard her pace back to her desk, the footsteps muted by the carpet. It felt rough under my hands. I tenderly rubbed my arm where the tendrils had gripped. There was no indication that anything had ever been there. Not a scratch or a blemish I could feel. My clothes were intact and untorn. I punched the floor in rage. I hated being blind again. I hated that the fog had managed to wrest away from me that iota of a triumph and good fortune that regaining my vision had been. I hated that Carissa had lied to me, telling me that the fog would kill when I had heard and felt both our bodies laying here after the fog had done its work. I hated that I would have to go crawling back to the walkway by the riverbed, groping blindly to find the right bench, and then hope that that deceitful woman would pity me enough to have a seer grant me back my sight. It was like a nightmare where I ran, and ran, but my feet didn't move, and my inevitable demise just came closer and closer. I barely cared that the security would be there to escort me out of the building. I could manage, I was fairly certain, between the support of the resistance and... well, that was it. Carissa was unlikely to think I had anything to offer now that I was no longer employed at the firm, and I would be fortunate enough to convince her that I deserved to have my sight back. "Can you see?" I asked the receptionist as I gathered my wits and stood shakily. I was convinced she could see before, but I had been a little louder than I intended as I snooped through the office and around her desk. But the way she came at me and did everything possible to avoid a glance at the terrifying fog preparing to attack convinced me she could see. She had just gone about hiding it in that stiff, robotic manner. Everybody who could see seemed to have their own way of hiding it, refined by practice, but still an awkward mimicry of how the actual blind acted. "No," she answered, her voice demure and resigned. So that was that. I resolved to convince Carissa to have a seer restore my vision, be it with words or in some less savory manner. She had the seers that the resistance couldn't find. She had planted this little seed in my mind. She hadn't asked me to come snooping through the top levels of the building, but I couldn't help but blame her for confirming my suspicions and giving me a little trickle of information and half-truths. I was convinced she knew more than she was letting on. As an aside, Drew, but you pelted her with so many questions, and now you're blaming her about trickling information to you? And also, I feel like it's entirely valid to assume that the fog kills you. Because, if he hadn't, pulled the attendant with her, the receptionist with her, or with him, then, maybe he would have died? We don't really know. So I feel like he's coming to a lot of conclusions about people's intentions without really knowing the full picture yet himself. Even though he's found out more than other people have, it seems. It's still not quite, we don't have the full explanation yet. So that's very interesting, but I'm like, Drew, come on, man. Continuing. "Are you okay? Your face, the fog, there was blood." My voice tapered off, reluctant to relive the carnage that the fog had ravaged upon her face. "I'm fine," she answered resolutely. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her voice was more confident now. I didn't doubt that she had no recollection of what had happened. That, or I feel like she's hiding it to save herself, So I don't really know what happened, but it's possible that she had her sight and then just got it taken away, and then she just doesn't want anybody to know so that she doesn't actually get killed. Her voice was more confident now. I didn't doubt that she had no recollection of what had happened. I had seen my own arms torn and punctured by the tendrils of the fog, but now felt no pain and had no physical mark indicating that any damage had been done. The elevator dinged and the attendant greeted the receptionist warmly, as if the fog hadn't just assaulted and maimed us both all over again. He must have traveled up with it, ignorant to its presence as it quietly lingered all around him. I wondered if it was still around us now, lurking hungrily or curling around my arms, ready to seize me again in a moment's notice. He had other people with him now. I could tell by the bustle of footsteps and clothes rustling against clothes. Hands confidently grabbed each of my arms, the grips much more tangible than the grip of the fog, but still far less terrifying. There was comfort in what was known. The hands didn't grasp and reach like tendrils of fog or hands of blind people. I let them pull me towards the elevator and paused before stepping on. The guards acquiesced, allowing me a brief moment. Out of habit, I turned my head back towards the receptionist. I couldn't see her, but I knew she was there by the sounds of her fingers deftly typing away. "Doesn't it bother you?" I gestured with my head in spite of neither of us being able to see. "That they've taken away your sight?" One of the guards pulled at my arm again, beckoning me onwards. I had asked so many people the same question in the early days of the Great Blinding. I always got the same answer. It never seemed to bother them. At least, not nearly as much as it bothered me. "You'll get used to it," she finally responded ominously as I stepped on and I heard the doors begin to close. I had heard that answer 1,000 times before. I never did quite get used to it, and I could never quite comprehend how other people did. The attendant rode down in silence. I wonder if he enjoyed the rides with company more than the ones without. Surely this ride in particular couldn't be enjoyable unless it was routine. The thought had crossed my mind that perhaps people like me, those who had unintentionally regained their sight, were gently encouraged to divulge their secret. That way it would seem natural once their sight was taken away again. As natural as a manipulative, blinding fog could be. Maybe the attendant enjoyed the countless indistinguishable voices carelessly discussing business and personal matters alike. Maybe he enjoyed the silence, the whir of the elevator machines gradually growing louder as the apparatus accelerated and the eventual ding to indicate that the trip was over. Maybe he enjoyed life this way, invisibly going about his routine, indifferent to the ulterior motives of his passengers. It had to be easier to just press the buttons and ride up and down than to start asking questions and be escorted out of the building. The grip on my arms loosened, the guards chatted idly between themselves as we skipped every floor on the way down. Finally, one of them let go of my arm. I waited a moment to ensure he wasn't just scratching or adjusting his grip, but then I blindly lifted it towards where I knew the button panel was, taking care not to betray my movements by stepping in that direction. My arm was pulled aggressively downwards again, and the guard regained his grip. We fell into an uncomfortable silence, not willing to acknowledge the preemptive and inexplicable reaction to what they shouldn't have been able to see. Wow. All right. Yeah, so we've got the 5 sections, the 5 parts of this story. I really enjoyed how in-depth this one, and how not only did we get a lot of social commentary, but also kind of like just enough information to sort of come to some of our own conclusions, but it definitely is very ambiguous still what's going on. The fog is still left a big mystery. What the firm has to do with it is also left a very big mystery. And we've got a little bit of information, but still not a whole lot. The sky is blue, but everything is still gray. What's happening there? I don't know what's going on. So that's a very interesting one. And I liked the length of it as well. It seems that there's some people talking about the pacing, and I quite enjoyed the pacing of this one. The dynamic beats of it was a lot of fun. But I also do think that Drew has been very foolish this entire time. He finds out that he can see, and then he sees, "Oh, don't tell them that you can see." And then he proceeds to go walk around and act very obviously like he can see. And then he gets caught, or like basically finds someone who also is like, you know, making it obvious that they can see by coloring themselves with color, and then he goes with them. And they have all this stuff, and they have this like underground society. And I think that was a very interesting concept. I did very much enjoy learning about that group of people. I do wish that we got a little bit more of that later on. We saw them a little bit more than just that brief glimpse, but what we did get to see of them, I enjoyed. And then we got the introduction of Carissa, and I really loved Carissa's character, that like opposing voice of like what I was already thinking with the, you know, this is kind of foolish, it seems, just like jumping into this, making a resistance movement. I feel like this is dangerous. There's not a lot of security going on. Like, it feels like there are going to be casualties from this. But at the same time, they had this bustling, you know, community where like clearly they're not afraid of the risks. So clearly it doesn't happen often enough that they should be worried. And, you know, Drew only really got caught once he, you know, tried to do the stupid thing of just heading straight up to the top floor. Like, I don't think that was a good decision personally. I think he was jumping the gun way too much. And my complaint still stands. And I'm surprised that he did in fact survive. And so that was like an interesting turn of the story, I suppose. And I'm interested in this receptionist character who seems to know more than she lets on, probably isn't actually, telling the truth in a lot of situations where she said, no, like I can't see, but I have a sneaking suspicion that like perhaps she could, but is just, protecting herself. And so perhaps, perhaps Carissa should find a more reliable person to, infiltrate this firm and find more answers. But this was very fascinating. And honestly, I really liked the way that this story builds a larger narrative out of this prompt. And there we have it. We got a couple of different short stories of various lengths, a couple of short ones and a couple of longer ones where people wrote a couple more parts afterwards. And I love this concept of, starting with a prompt and then seeing what people can make of it. I've really enjoyed reading this so far. And as I find more, I'll share more of these stories with you guys. So thank you so much for watching today's Friday Night Fairy Tales episode. And hopefully I'll be back with more. Thank you so much, and as always, have some sweet dreams. Good night, everybody. Good night.